Sarah Donovan is with us to give us some expert opinion on this. Sarah, how are you?
Not well. I don't want to leave the house today, to be honest.
House private, I believe, is the phrase for situations just like this. So, what happened from a Cork perspective, and how do they come back from this?
As good as Limerick were, by half-time, Cork had conceded 2-5 in turnovers to Limerick. So Cork weren't even retaining their own possession. At one stage in the first half, 3 balls went down on top of the Cork half-forward line. The boys went to catch the ball in hand and they dropped it to the ground. We praise Cork for their skill set, their first touch, and yesterday that was not evident. So it has to start there. You know, in high pressure situations, they have to be able to retain possession. Another stat was that they'd lost 50% of their possession in the first half. Crazy. Like giving that ball back to Limerick. You win it so hard. It takes so much out of you to win it, and then you just give it back. So I think from a Cork player's point of view, they can look at that game and say, we didn't perform at all. So what does 20% of performance give us? What does 40% of performance give us? And then, as you said, you know, in terms of coming back and where are they now? I think that's where they have to start. How do we get 20%? How do we get 40%? And how do we get to 100% to actually come to a level that Limerick are at?
I think that's a really good point. And so obviously Limerick put Cork under immense amount of pressure at various stages, but not just those points where Cork were losing possession. The puck out where the keeper would go short to any of the full back line, it would get fumbled and it would take a second to pick up, and all of a sudden there was pressure on, as opposed to it going straight to hand and everybody feeling confident and happy. It looked like they were nervous, and it looked like that the occasion got to them, and then on top of that you also had Limerick putting in an all-time great performance. So maybe that's the bit where they can at least point to a young team. You know, this isn't the end of a team, this is certainly the start of a team. Maybe that's the difference with the Waterford side that got annihilated. That was the end of a team. And that's the bit, they're like, okay, you've got that out of your system now. The next time, that's not going to happen.
Well, the next time you'd hope there'd be 80,000 fans. So if they can't cope in front of 40, how are they going to cope in front of 80? But look, that's just me being harsh this morning. But look, bar 4 of the players, everybody was born after 1997. I heard that yesterday and I was going, holy God, like that's how young this team is. And I suppose what's exciting is that the 220s winning, you know, within the last couple of weeks, the minors winning on Saturday night, that was so comprehensive. And that was a completely different style of team from Cork that we have seen in a long, long time. They mixed it. They could play long, they could play short. Their physical, like their aerial ability, plucking balls out of the sky for fun. That's the stuff that I suppose we had forgotten about with the likes of Niall Mack and Timmy Mack and those players back in the noughties. It was nice to see that coming back into the players from Cork on Saturday night. So there'll be a couple of casualties from Sunday's game who won't see an All-Ireland final again naturally. But the beauty of it is that Cork have those 20s and minors coming through. And look, we have to put them somewhere. They have to go somewhere. So it's important that those 20s and minors get as much exposure and as quickly as they can. So next year you could see a completely new Cork setup.
You think the possibility of an overhaul is pretty much going to happen straight away?
Well, the new players have somewhere to go. You know, it's not like, as you said, we're not Waterford. You know, we aren't at the end of a life cycle, but we have all of these players that need to find a home. So we have to show them quickly where that home is.
What then happens if something like this happens to the new bunch of players in a pretty quick manner? Say, if a lot of these new players are brought in next year, and even if it's in the Munster Championship, that Limerick give them a good pasting, is there a danger at all that you need to give them a bit of protection from what might happen over the next little while, and that maybe a drip feed could be better? Or do you think it doesn't matter, they're young, they will get over whatever is coming at them in senior hurling literally over the next little while?
That's where they're going. They're going to senior hurling, so there's no point in you know, putting cotton wool around them. That Limerick team suffered a heavy defeat in 2017 and didn't look like the hurling team that they are now, but got the exposure, became very aware what championship looked like, what other teams were built like, and then developed into the team that we saw in 2018 who took a bit of luck and now are the formidable unit they are today. But that team initially were put out to pasture and told, this is what hurling is. So I wouldn't be protecting the Cork players now. I would be exposing them at every level to what's coming.
I guess they have to be good enough to get in the team as well. That's the other side of it. So you don't want them to think, okay, we won on under 20s, either of the two teams that won, that there's going to be a procession straight through, that there needs to be competition there. And that's what all the great teams have. It certainly sounds like, from what we're hearing, the training sessions at Limerick are fairly savage. And even dropping Gillette this year was a sign that actually no one is safe if Gillan's getting dropped. So that's what this Cork management team need to inculcate, is intense competition and nobody being certain of their place, while at the same time giving everybody the confidence that if they make mistakes over the next while, there's room for that and there's room for them to grow. It's a very difficult balancing act to get right.
It is, but look, we talked at the top of the segment about Cork's first touch not being up to par yesterday. Those intense competition games that Tommy Walsh will have referred to previously, where Kilkenny's A's and B's were going at each other hammer and tongs, bring up that intensity level in training games so that you get used to clinging that first ball, that first touch becoming so sharp that you don't even think about it anymore. That's why you need those 40, 50 players in Cork at this time to be able to bring each other up to par, so that when they hit Croke Park, they're not missing that first touch, they're not fumbling the ball. It's hard to create that intensity that Limerick brought yesterday, in the 6 months from January to June when you were waiting to play championship. But having 50 players with the ability to play as near to that level as you can makes you have that opportunity.
How much pressure do you feel is on this management team then next year, Sarah? Because it is a star-studded lineup that Kieran Kingston was getting credit for assembling around him. It seemed like an absence of ego to ensure that all these great names came in and to take responsibility maybe and to try and take this Cork team to the next level. But there is, as you say, going to be a new generation of players that have nowhere to go but into senior hurling. There is a pressure on nurturing that group of players to ensure that their potential is maximised.
Pat Ryan and Noel Furlong, being the All-Ireland winning managers, are obviously, next in line to take the throne, we'll say, Kieran's position. I think Kieran and Diarmuid have potentially taken Cork as far as they can go. It would be unusual for a manager to step away after getting his team to an All-Ireland final, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. It is a massive commitment for a management team to stick in for, another 11 months, and they'll have to look at their personal situations again. But you shouldn't, when you're leaving a management setup, you shouldn't take the kitchen sink with you. So it shouldn't be seen as necessarily a bad thing or, a negative thing that these management might step away. They've created a template, they've laid a foundation, they've left them in a better position than they were. So if they do leave, the next manager picks up the gauntlet and he goes running with it.
I guess the thing is they probably need to be looking beyond the next 11 months as well, though, that if there's an acceptance that maybe they won't get over the line next year, there needs to be probably a 2 or 3 year plan in place.
And most comfortable in terms of that plan would possibly be Noel Furlong. He has the 17s. They're a formidable bunch, brings them through maybe, into 20s and then into senior. So maybe somebody like Noel Furlong would have to commit to 5 years to ensure that Cork would bring that potential to an All-Ireland final and get that team over the line. Is it fair for one man to take on a role for 5 years? It's an awful ask. And that's why management has changed so dramatically, because you literally give your whole life for the time span.
Just one last question I have on that then is Anthony Daly in the Examiner this morning is saying that his Cork minor team is one of the best teams he's ever seen. So is there a staggering of the talent that's going to be coming through, Sarah? As in, do we actually need to wait for this minor team to be the ones that get the senior level rather than these 20s teams? It's not a bad bunch to be picking from, All-Ireland champions, but are the minors actually the special bunch?
But that depends on the competition that's coming through from the other side. So we're looking at Limerick right now, and then we're asking how many All-Irelands they're potentially going to have. So maybe two more before, bodies start to hurt. That level of physicality that they play with isn't sustainable. So does that mean that you're looking at those minors hitting 2021, the 20s that have beaten every team in the country now peerless and hitting, an All-Ireland at 24, 25, a happy marriage between the two, and then with possibly Limerick, fading in 24, 25, that Cork team coming through. Maybe we have a bit of pain ahead of us before we actually see light.
It feels that way for everybody, doesn't it?
But would it not be is it not okay to see something spectacular on the field for a couple of years? You know,
Oh, yeah.
I just think the
It
standard
is.
that they have brought it to,
Yeah.
you know, it's going to improve hurling more. You know, I'm not disappointed that I'm going to see this incredible Limerick team for the next couple of years.
I'm dying to see somebody put it up to them just to see how high that standard that they have can go, because I think that's the next thing that we have to really see. Is it looks like they've reached a level of proficiency in skill and athleticism that we've never seen or rarely ever seen. But it'd be great to see somebody who is close to them push them to see what it looks like when they get into oxygen depletion and when they start to make some mistakes, and because the thing is they are really good street brawlers as well. There was a little bit in the first 15 minutes where Cork putting it up to them and harrying them, and Limerick were like, yeah, we can do that too. Don't worry, we've got that in our locker.
Oh, look, don't question the fact that there was dark arts going on yesterday. There was hurleys being broken. There was third man tackles. There was lots of stuff on the field that went unnoticed because sometimes the narrative doesn't suit. But you're right. They can mix it, you know, with the best of them. So 20 points. I think they shot 20 points with 20 wides. You know, yesterday. That's a team that isn't being pushed to their limits, certainly, because if you can hit 20 wides and win by 16, you are having an easy day at the office.
Yeah. Sarah, I do want to ask you about the next weekend. It's a huge weekend for the Camogie semi-finals, and that the semi-finals are in Croker, Cork against Kilkenny and Tip against Galway. It's a double header on Sunday, so it's a big occasion, a big event, and it's another slow, steady sign that there's some progress being made.
We need bums on seats, though. There was nobody in Páirc Uí Chaoimh on Saturday night. The Camogie Association needs to get their acting gear now and get bodies in Croke Park, because nothing worse than playing in an empty stadium. So it's all well and good to have these big days and be on TV, but we actually need to see women supporting women and men supporting women and having actual, real physical support for the girls on the field.
The fact that Cork and Kilkenny have a nice rivalry over the last number of years is surely going to help sell this.
I would think so, but I think Kilkenny are ahead of Cork right now. Kilkenny have had a much more solid, comprehensive championship campaign. Cork have struggled to get going, and they have shown very little star quality during their championship games. Maybe that's because the competition that they had during those games wasn't up to par, but I think Cork need a couple of weeks hard work and to be ready for Kilkenny. I think Kilkenny in a semi-final always fancy themselves against Cork.
Okay, so you think that's relatively straightforward from Kilkenny's perspective?
Not straightforward, but I would expect them to win this game.
Okay, and what about the other semi-final between Tip and Galway? How have they both been doing so far this season?
Galway will be coming into this cold. They were in a semi-final, with playing. They haven't played in three or 4 weeks. It's hard to find competitive games outside of the top 3 or 4 teams. So I don't know how much work they were able to do in the background. Tip obviously played against Waterford on Saturday, so they'll feel like they have that championship heat. I think it's Tip's to win. I'm going to back Tip on this one. It'll be a first All-Ireland final for Tip since 2006.
That'll be a big surprise, right? Because this Galway team have All-Ireland winners in their ranks and some brilliant superstar performances over recent years. They've just beaten Kilkenny 3 weeks ago, so that would be a bit of a shock, would it?
They beat Kilkenny by a point, but I think that game was an outlier because they've obviously had a score to settle against Kilkenny separate, losing the All-Ireland, losing the league final. I just think that the momentum is with Tip. So yes, it will be a surprise, but it's duly warranted. I think the Tip Galway Kilkenny narrative is laying a little thin, and I think we need some new competition in to mix it up.
You said that Kilkenny Cork, that the gap is maybe bigger than it used to be between these two counties. Does the same go for everybody else and Kilkenny at this point?
Yes, we played Kilkenny back in the league and we lost by 5. I think the Kilkenny team that's there now, we'd probably lose by 15. So it's just as they went through the championship season, they've just been so efficient, almost Limerick-like. They've seen things that they want to improve, like Tommy Shefflin, Henry Shefflin's brother, is in there with Brian Dowling, and the things that they don't like, they change. And that's the sign of a really good team, and that's the sign of a hurling team. So it's great to have hurling minds involved in Camogie because it's bringing up the standard, which it needs to do.
All right, Sarah, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
No problem. Thanks, guys. Go back to bed.
It's Sarah Donovan giving us her thoughts on the weekend past and the weekend to come.